The apartment smelled of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and betrayal. Grace Mitchell stood barefoot on the marble floor of her midtown kitchen, one hand pressing the small of her aching back, the other holding a wooden spoon that trembled between her fingers. At 7 months pregnant, every step felt like walking through water. But she wanted tonight to be perfect. It was Thanksgiving. Their first one in the city, the first since Lucas promised her they'd start fresh. The table was set like a magazine photo. Linen napkins folded beside the silverware, candles glowing against the glass windows that looked out over the Manhattan skyline. Grace had polished every glass, arranged white roses in a crystal vase, and even written Lucas's name on a card. "Because family traditions matter," she had said that morning, trying to sound cheerful while he buttoned his crisp shirt. He kissed her forehead absently. "I might be late," he murmured. "Client dinner. You know how it is." "On Thanksgiving?" she'd asked softly. Lucas smiled, the way he did when he wanted to end a conversation. "They're investors, Grace. One deal could change everything for us." That was 3 hours ago. Now the turkey sat cold on its platter. The cranberry sauce had congealed. Grace's phone lay face down beside her plate, silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. She checked the time again. 7:48 p.m. The city below shimmered like 1,000 promises, but none of them were his. When the doorbell didn't ring, Grace sat down. Her feet were swollen, her breath shallow. She whispered to the baby inside her, "Daddy's just busy, sweetheart." The baby kicked once, a soft reminder that she wasn't entirely alone. Her phone buzzed. A text from her friend Anna blinked on the screen. "Grace, I think you need to see this." Attached was a short video, Instagram story 15 seconds long. Lucas in his navy suit, laughing. Across from him, a young woman in a red dress lifted her glass of white wine. Behind them, the glittering skyline of Manhattan and the faint golden lights of the River Cafe. Their place. Grace's stomach clenched. She turned the volume up. She could hear his voice clearly over the music. "To fresh beginnings," Lucas said, clinking glasses. Her throat tightened. The room swayed. For a moment she thought she might faint. She gripped the table to steady herself. The turkey, the flowers, the candles, suddenly all looked like props from a cruel play. Grace didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She simply stared at the screen until her reflection appeared in the dark glass, eyes swollen, mouth trembling. Then she whispered the sentence that would change everything. "He's not coming home." Grace placed the spoon down, wiped her tears, and walked toward the bedroom, where a sealed envelope waited, signed 2 weeks ago, just in case this night ever came. Grace's hands shook as she replayed the video again and again, each loop cutting deeper than the one before. Lucas's laugh, so warm, so easy, hadn't sounded like that in months. He wasn't tense or distracted. He was relaxed, alive, glowing under the candlelight of the River Cafe, the same place he'd once promised to make new memories with her. The girl across from him, Sienna Cole, looked barely 25. Long brown hair, red lipstick, manicured hands resting over his. She leaned in close, whispering something that made Lucas grin like a man who'd never heard the word responsibility. Grace set the phone down carefully, as if any sudden movement might shatter what little was left of her. Her vision blurred. For a moment she couldn't breathe. The baby inside her twisted gently as though sensing the chaos in her chest. She whispered, "It's okay, honey. Mommy's fine." But the lie burned her throat. The sound of rain began tapping against the windows, thin streaks sliding down the glass. Outside, Manhattan sparkled in the wet night, mocking her with its beauty. Inside, the only light came from the flickering candles, tiny flames gasping for air, just like her marriage. Grace took slow breaths, counting them the way her therapist had taught her after her miscarriage 2 years ago. Back then, Lucas had held her and said, "We'll try again. I'll take care of you." Now he was taking someone else to the same restaurant where they'd mourned that loss together. She reached for her phone again. The video had new comments now, little hearts, laughing emojis, one that said "Power Couple Goals." Grace pressed pause before she could vomit. Her reflection stared back at her, hair messy, face pale, eyes swollen. She barely recognized the woman looking back. Her mind started racing. Rent, insurance, hospital bills. The apartment lease was under Lucas's name. The credit card she used was his secondary. If she left, she'd have nowhere to go. No job, no income, no family nearby. Then, somewhere in the back of her mind, a memory flickered. Her cousin Adrian's voice from 2 weeks ago. Grace, if he ever gives you reason to doubt again, don't cry, don't fight. Just call me, I'll handle the rest. Adrian had handed her a sealed envelope then, cream-colored, embossed with a corporate law firm's logo. That you might never need it, she'd said, but keep it anyway. Grace had laughed at the time. You sound like you're planning a war. Adrian had smiled. I am. I just hope he gives me an excuse to start it. Now that envelope sat inside the nightstand drawer, right next to her wedding album. Grace rose slowly, her back throbbing, the world spinning slightly from exhaustion. She picked up the photo frame on the wall, the one from their honeymoon in Maui. Lucas's arm was around her then, his smile bright, his eyes tender. She pressed her fingers over the glass until her nails hurt. Then, something inside her snapped, not with rage, but with clarity. She went to the bedroom, opened the drawer, and took out the envelope. Inside were neatly stacked documents, a drafted divorce petition, a list of emergency contacts, and a short note from Adrian. If he betrays you again, leave the ring and sign the papers. I'll handle everything else. No tears, no begging. Grace sank onto the edge of the bed, tears finally spilling down her face. The baby kicked again, one strong, steady movement. It was as if her child was saying, "Go, Mom, go." She looked around the room that once felt like home. Lucas's suits hanging in the closet, his Mont Blanc pen on the nightstand, the faint smell of his cologne lingering in the air. "Not anymore," she whispered. Grace reached for her purse, grabbed her car keys, and slipped the envelope inside her coat pocket. Her reflection in the mirror looked different now, still broken, but focused. She didn't know where she'd go yet, but she knew one thing for sure. When Lucas walked through that door tonight, he'd find nothing left of the woman who once waited for him. The rain had turned into a storm by the time Grace found her phone again. The city outside was a blur of headlights and wet asphalt. She sat on the edge of her bed, the envelope still clutched in her hand. Her heart pounded like she'd run miles, though she hadn't moved. Her thumb hovered over Adrian's name. She hesitated. Adrian was her cousin, yes, but she was also the type of woman who scared most men, and truth be told, sometimes scared Grace too. Always calm, always sharp, always in control. Adrian didn't do emotions, she did strategies. But Grace had no one else. Her mother would just say, "Endure it, it's your duty." Her friends would pity her. Adrian at least would act. Grace pressed call. The screen rang 3 times before a voice answered, low and focused. "Grace, it's late." Her throat tightened. "Adrian, I saw him, with her." A pause, the sound of papers rustling on the other end. "Tell me exactly what happened." Grace described the video, the restaurant, the laughter, the champagne. She didn't cry, her voice was flat, distant. When she finished, there was silence. Then Adrian spoke. "Where are you right now?" "In the apartment." "Is he there?" "No." "Good. Don't wait for him." Grace blinked. "Adrian, I don't. Listen to me." Adrian's tone turned surgical. "Grab your essentials, IDs, prenatal records, phone charger, that envelope I gave you, and leave. Right now." "Where would I even go?" "Midtown Park Residences, Building C. I booked a service department there 2 weeks ago under your name." Grace froze. "You what?" "I had a feeling." For the first time that night, Grace felt something other than despair, confusion mixed with awe. Adrian had known. Somehow, she'd known. "I can't just leave everything," Grace whispered. Adrian's reply was ice. "You're not leaving everything. You're leaving nothing. Lucas already moved his assets into another account. I've been watching the filings." Grace's knees went weak. "He what? He's planning to claim you're mentally unstable due to pregnancy hormones. That's why he pushed you off the teaching contract. Less financial independence makes it easier to win custody." Grace sank onto the floor, cold creeping up her spine. "My God." Adrian's voice softened slightly. "Grace, I know it's terrifying, but I've seen this before. You're not crazy. He's manipulating the system. I won't let him win." The baby kicked again, sharp this time. Grace put a hand over her belly, breathing shallow. "Adrian," she whispered, "I'm scared. I know, but fear isn't weakness. It's instinct. Use it. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Pack only what you need. Leave the ring on the table beside the papers. Make it clean. Make it final." The line went dead. Grace moved like someone half asleep. She grabbed her documents, ultrasound photos, a few clothes, and the small stuffed bear she'd bought for the baby. The thunder outside masked her sobs. She paused by the dining table. The turkey had gone cold. The candles nearly burned out. She took off her wedding ring, staring at the faint, pale line on her finger where it had rested for 7 years. It was almost symbolic. Her skin lighter where love used to live. She placed the ring on top of the envelope. For a moment, she hesitated, wondering if Lucas would even notice it. Then she whispered to the silent room, "This is the last thing I'll ever give you." A horn sounded outside, the sleek hum of Adrian's black Mercedes idling in the rain. Grace wiped her tears, picked up her bag, and walked out of the apartment without looking back. By the time Lucas came home that night, he would find only an empty chair, a cold dinner, and the ashes of the woman he thought he owned. The rain fell in sheets as Grace stepped into the night, her coat clinging to her shoulders, one hand cradling her swollen belly. The city lights blurred through tears and rain, each taxi splash echoing the heartbeat in her ears. Adrian's black Mercedes idled at the curb, wipers slicing through the downpour like clockwork. Adrian stepped out, umbrella in one hand, her heels clicking against the pavement. Even in the storm, she looked unshaken, hair slicked back, blazer immaculate, eyes sharp. Grace almost collapsed from relief. Adrian took her arm. "Easy, you okay?" Grace nodded weakly. "I left it all, everything." Adrian's gaze softened just enough. "Good. That means he has nothing left to use against you." They got into the car, and for the first few blocks, silence filled the space between them. The rhythmic sound of rain against glass was almost hypnotic. Grace pressed her palms against the seatbelt, trying to steady her breath. Adrian drove with one hand, her other scrolling through her phone, emailing someone. Grace glanced over. "Who are you writing to?" "My investigator," Adrian said flatly. "We'll need full financial records, texts, property documents. I want a timeline ready by morning." Grace's throat closed. "You already knew this was coming." Adrian kept her eyes on the road. "Grace, men like Lucas don't cheat for love. They cheat for power. When they sense control slipping, they rewrite the story. I wasn't going to wait for that to happen to you." Grace looked down at her belly. The fabric stretched tight. "He said I was overreacting, that I made everything about me." Adrian laughed, bitter. Classic gaslight, make the victim apologize for bleeding. The car passed through the glowing streets of Manhattan, neon signs reflected in puddles, people hurrying under umbrellas. The world looked the same, but for Grace, everything had shifted. She had crossed an invisible line, from wife to survivor. They reached Midtown Park Residences. The building loomed tall, glass and steel glistening with rain. The doorman recognized Adrian instantly, rushing to open the door. Grace followed her into the elevator, her steps heavy but determined. When the elevator doors closed, the silence between them deepened. Grace finally spoke. "Do you think he'll come after me?" Adrian met her eyes in the mirror. "Absolutely, but that's what we want." Grace frowned. "We want that?" "Yes," Adrian said simply. "Because when he does, we'll have proof, texts, calls, threats. Every word he uses to intimidate you becomes ammunition." The elevator chimed. They stepped into a furnished apartment that smelled faintly of lemon and new paint. Adrian flicked on the lights. The place was small but warm, neutral walls, clean sheets, a soft couch, a stocked fridge. Grace turned in a slow circle. "You really planned all this?" Adrian shrugged. "You don't build an exit plan while you're running. You build it before you need to." Grace sank onto the couch, finally exhaling. Her body trembled with exhaustion. "I thought I'd feel free," she whispered, "but I just feel empty." Adrian sat beside her, resting a steady hand on her shoulder. "Freedom never feels like fireworks, Grace. It feels like silence, and silence is power." Grace leaned back, eyes half closed. The baby kicked gently. Adrian looked at her stomach and said quietly, "You did the right thing. For both of you." Outside, thunder rolled over the city. The storm was still raging, but inside, for the first time in months, Grace wasn't afraid. What she didn't know was that while she was catching her breath, Lucas had already walked into the apartment she'd left behind. And what he found on the kitchen table would ignite a war he could never win. Lucas Reed's key turned in the lock at exactly 11:43 p.m. The hallway outside was quiet, his polished shoes echoing against the marble as he stepped inside. The first thing he noticed was the silence. No music, no clatter from the kitchen, no soft hum of Grace's voice. He loosened his tie, muttering, "Finally, peace." The faint smell of roasted turkey lingered, mixed with the fading scent of Grace's vanilla candles. For a fleeting second, he imagined her asleep on the couch, one hand resting on her belly, waiting for him like she always did. But when he rounded the corner into the dining room, the sight hit him like a punch. The table was still set for two, candles melted down to stubs, the turkey untouched, the cranberry sauce congealed, and in the center of it all sat his wedding ring. His ring. Right beside a thick cream envelope sealed neatly, his name written in Grace's delicate cursive. He froze. The air in the apartment seemed to thin. "Grace?" His voice cracked. "Nothing. Only the hum of the refrigerator answered." He set his briefcase down, eyes darting around the room. Her purse was gone, her coat, her shoes, even her pregnancy vitamins were missing from the counter. "Grace," he called louder, but the echo only bounced back at him. Then he saw it, another envelope, smaller, half-tucked beneath the turkey platter. He pulled it free. Inside was a single photo, a screenshot from the video that had gone viral hours earlier. Him and Sienna, laughing, wine glasses raised. Lucas's jaw tightened. That? He stopped himself. The word mistake formed in his mind, but even he knew better. He'd been careful, or at least he thought he had. He sank into the chair at the head of the table, staring at the ring. A muscle in his cheek twitched. His first instinct wasn't guilt. It was anger. "How dare she?" he whispered. "After everything I've done?" He picked up his phone, dialing Grace's number. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. Still voicemail. The third time, the call didn't even ring. Blocked. His chest tightened. "You think you can just walk out?" He scrolled to Adrian's contact, hesitated, then pressed call. The line clicked. "Lucas," came Adrian's voice, smooth, detached. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Safe," Adrian said. "You have no right to interfere in my marriage." "Marriage?" Adrian laughed softly. "You mean the performance where you take your pregnant wife for granted while parading your mistress through Brooklyn?" "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know everything," she replied calmly. "And here's what you need to understand. From this moment on, every word you say can and will be used against you. Do not contact Grace directly again. All communication goes through me." Lucas's jaw clenched. "You can't stop me." "Try," Adrian said, and hung up. He stood there for a long moment, staring at his reflection in the blackened window. For the first time he saw himself clearly, not the polished businessman, not the charming husband, but a man alone in a luxury apartment that suddenly felt like a cage. He slammed his fist onto the table, rattling the silverware. "You think you're smarter than me, Grace? You have no idea who you're dealing with." His phone buzzed again. A notification. Local social page tagged you in a video. It was the same clip, him and Sienna laughing at the River Cafe, now circulating among clients, friends, even his mother's church group. Lucas's hands trembled. The empire he'd built on image was cracking, and he didn't even know how fast it was about to collapse. Because what he didn't realize was that Adrienne wasn't just defending Grace, she was already dismantling everything he'd ever built, one signature at a time. Sunlight spilled through the curtains of the new apartment, pale and thin, like the start of a life that wasn't sure it wanted to begin. Grace stirred on the couch, her body sore, her head pounding. For a few seconds, she didn't remember where she was. Then the smell of fresh coffee hit her, and she saw Adrienne standing by the window, scrolling through her iPad. Grace pushed herself up slowly, one hand instinctively on her belly. "What time is it?" "Almost 9, Adrienne said. "You slept maybe 3 hours." Grace blinked at the clock. "Did Lucas call?" "About 20 times, Adrienne replied dryly. "Then he called me. I told him what every guilty man hates to hear." Grace tried to smile. "That he's not in control anymore?" Adrienne smirked. "Exactly." She poured Grace a cup of coffee and handed it to her. "Decaf," she said. "Don't glare at me." Grace took the cup, the warmth grounding her. For a moment she simply sat there, letting the silence wrap around her like a blanket. It wasn't comfort, but it was safety, and that was more than she'd had in months. "I feel like a ghost," she murmured. "I left everything I owned behind." Adrienne leaned against the counter. "You left everything he owned. There's a difference." Grace looked up, her eyes tired but sharp. "Do you think he'll stop?" Adrienne didn't sugarcoat it. "No, men like Lucas don't stop, they retaliate." Grace's hand tightened around her mug. "Then what do I do?" Adrian's tone softened, almost like an older sister's. You document everything. Every text, every voicemail, every message that sounds even remotely threatening. When he reaches out, and he will, you keep your cool. You don't block him completely. Let him dig his own grave. Grace nodded, absorbing every word. You make it sound like a courtroom. It is a courtroom, Adrian said. He's already preparing his case. So are we. Grace looked down at her belly, tracing a slow circle with her hand. I thought love was supposed to protect you. Adrian's eyes softened. Love protects you, Grace. Manipulation traps you. What you had with Lucas was never love. It was control dressed up as devotion. A single tear slid down Grace's cheek. I keep thinking about that night we met, she whispered. He told me I made him want to be a better man. I thought I'd finally found safety. Adrian crossed the room and crouched beside her. You didn't find safety in him, Grace. You're building it now, for you and your baby. That's what matters. The baby kicked then, a firm, steady movement that made Grace gasp softly. Adrian smiled faintly. He's strong, takes after his mother. Grace laughed through her tears. He better not take after his father. They both chuckled, and for a moment the heaviness in the room lifted. Then Adrian's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her expression hardening. He's already calling in favors. I just got an alert. Lucas moved $50,000 out of your joint account last night. Grace's stomach dropped. He can't do that. He can try, Adrian said, grabbing her bag. But I froze the account an hour ago. I knew he'd panic. This is just the start. Grace stood shakily. What happens next? Adrian opened the door, turning back with a look that was equal parts reassurance and warning. Next, we let him make the biggest mistake of his life. Grace watched her cousin leave, her heart pounding with fear and determination. She looked down at her belly again, whispering softly, We're going to be okay. But deep down, she knew the storm wasn't over. It was just beginning, and this time, Lucas wasn't the only one ready to fight. Lucas Reed woke up to chaos. His phone was buzzing non-stop, texts, missed calls, email alerts. The video from Thanksgiving had made its rounds overnight, shared across social feeds and office group chats. Real estate golden boy dines with mystery woman, one caption read. Clients were calling, partners were backing out, and his assistant left a voicemail that began with, We need to talk, sir, and ended with, You're trending. Lucas sat up in bed, head pounding. The apartment was eerily quiet without Grace's morning movements, the sound of her making tea, humming, her soft laughter when the kettle squealed. Instead, there was only the dull echo of regret he refused to acknowledge. He got up, poured himself whiskey instead of coffee, and opened his laptop. His inbox was full of messages from friends and well-wishers pretending not to gossip. One email subject line hit harder than the rest. Urgent. Financial transfer rejected. He frowned, clicking it open. The message read, Transfer of $50,000 from joint account declined due to pending legal hold. His jaw tightened. Adrian, he muttered. He grabbed his phone and dialed his lawyer, Mark Davenport, a sharp man who had once described Grace as pliable. She's not supposed to have access, Lucas hissed the moment Mark answered. Mark yawned. Well, apparently she's got a better lawyer. The hold was filed before your transfer hit. And Lucas, buddy, that's not your biggest problem right now. Lucas's voice darkened. Then what is? Your reputation? That video's everywhere. And apparently Adrian Carter is representing Grace. That woman doesn't lose. Lucas slammed the whiskey glass onto the counter. She's doing this on purpose. She's using Grace to destroy me. Mark sighed. Then you do what men in your position always do. Control the narrative. How? You play the good husband. Say she's emotional, overwhelmed, maybe struggling with her pregnancy. The court will believe you're trying to help her. It's classic. Lucas smirked slowly. Yes, of course. She's unstable. That's why she left. Perfect. He began typing a statement for his social media. Family matters can be difficult, especially during pregnancy. Please respect our privacy while Grace gets the support she needs. I love my wife and our baby. It was the kind of post people would scroll past and think, what a devoted husband. Satisfied, he hit post. Meanwhile, across town, Grace sat on the couch with Adrian, scrolling through the same post. Her jaw dropped. He's making it sound like I'm the problem. Adrian's lips curved into a cold smile. Good. Let him. Grace looked confused. Good? Every word he writes is evidence of manipulation, Adrienne said. The court calls it public gaslighting. It's gold. Let him keep performing. Grace stared at the post again, her chest tightening with anger. People are going to think I'm crazy. People thought I was crazy once too, Adrienne said quietly. Until I won. At that moment, Grace's phone buzzed again, Lucas calling. She stared at the screen, trembling. Adrienne placed a firm hand on hers. Answer. Calmly. Record it. Grace took a shaky breath and pressed accept. Lucas's voice oozed with practiced warmth. Grace, honey, I just posted something. I want the world to know I love you. Can we talk? Grace's eyes met Adrienne's. We are talking, Lucas, and I'm recording every word. There was a pause, one long, stunned silence. Then Lucas's tone cracked. You don't know what you're doing. Grace replied softly. For the first time, I think I do. Lucas hung up without another word. But the moment the call ended, Adrienne's phone lit up with a notification. Grace's recording had automatically backed up to her legal drive. And with that, the war officially began. Sunday morning dawned cold and gray. The kind of weather that made the city feel like it was holding its breath. Grace hadn't slept. She sat by the window of the service department, wrapped in one of Adrienne's coats, her hands resting over her stomach. The baby kicked softly, as if reminding her he was still there, still waiting. Adrienne entered, crisp and calm as always, balancing 2 Starbucks cups. Black tea for you, she said, handing one to Grace. Doctor's orders. Grace managed a tired smile. I keep thinking about Patricia. She's probably already heard everything. Adrienne arched a brow. Oh, she has, and she's pretending she hasn't. That woman's PR skills are impressive. Grace frowned. She called me yesterday. Adrienne sipped her coffee. What did she say? She told me not to make a scene, said families go through things, and that men have phases. Adrienne laughed without humor. Phases? What is he, the moon? Grace tried to smile, but her chest tightened instead. She said I should come to dinner at her house next Sunday. She called it a reconciliation meal. Adrienne froze mid-sip. He's setting you up. Grace blinked. What do you mean? Adrienne placed her cup down. Lucas needs witnesses. He'll have family there, maybe friends. He'll try to make you emotional, provoke you into losing control, and record it. Then he'll take that footage to court to prove you're unstable. Grace's blood ran cold. He'd do that? Adrienne met her eyes. He already did worse. For a long moment, Grace stared out the window. Snow had started to fall, tiny flakes swirling like dust over the city. She whispered, I can't keep living like this. Looking over my shoulder, wondering what he'll do next. Adrienne leaned forward, her tone low but fierce. Then stop reacting. Start playing offense. Grace looked confused. What does that mean? It means, Adrienne said, pulling a folder from her briefcase, we let him think his trap will work. You go to dinner, you stay calm, you say nothing. I'll handle the rest. Grace stared at her. You want me to walk into his plan? Adrienne smiled slightly. No, I want him to walk into mine. She opened the folder. Inside were printed statements, screenshots, and financial documents. Grace recognized some of the numbers. These are our accounts? Adrienne nodded. Joint accounts. Notice anything missing? Grace scanned the papers, then gasped. He withdrew almost 100 grand. Exactly, that's marital fraud. He used joint assets to fund his affair, dinners, hotel stays, gifts. He thinks he's untouchable because you're emotional and pregnant. Adrienne's voice hardened. But when a judge sees this, he's done. Grace's hands trembled. So what do I do at dinner? Adrienne reached into her coat pocket and placed a tiny black device on the table. You wear this? It's a mic? He'll think he's recording you, but really, we'll be recording him. Grace stared at the device, fear mixing with determination. And what if he figures it out? Adrienne smiled faintly. Then he learns the hard way that Mitchell women don't scare easily. Grace nodded slowly. You really think I can do this? Adrienne looked straight into her eyes. You already are. You left him. You're standing up. You're protecting your child. That's more courage than most people show in a lifetime. Grace exhaled shakily. Okay, Sunday dinner. Adrienne smirked. Sunday reckoning. The snow thickened outside, the city glowing under white light. Grace touched her belly gently and whispered, for us. She didn't know it yet, but that dinner, meant to humiliate her, would become the night the entire Reed family turned against Lucas forever. The week before the dinner felt endless. Every day carried the weight of waiting, waiting for Sunday, waiting for Lucas's next move, waiting for the courage not to break. Grace spent the mornings walking slowly through the apartment, one hand steady on her belly, the other gripping her phone. Adrienne had her document everything: blood pressure readings, prenatal updates, even the messages Lucas sent at midnight. Half threats, half apologies. "You're being dramatic. Come home before this gets ugly. I miss you, but you're not well." Each text read like a rope tightening around Grace's throat, but Adrienne called it gold. "Let him talk," Adrienne said during one of their meetings in the law firm's sleek Park Avenue office. The city glittered behind her, a world of glass and power. "Every message he sends builds our case. He's giving us a record of emotional manipulation." Grace looked around the conference room, her reflection caught in the glass wall. She looked small, pale, pregnant, wearing borrowed clothes, but her eyes held something new: fire. Adrienne spread out the evidence: bank statements, screenshots, receipts from hotels, and a new addition, an anonymous envelope that had arrived that morning. Inside was a flash drive. Adrienne plugged it into her laptop. The file opened to a recording. Lucas's voice, low and arrogant. "She's hormonal. She'll believe anything I say. Once I get custody, she can have her little breakdown somewhere else." Grace flinched. "Oh my God, who recorded that?" Adrienne smirked. "Our surprise witness, Sienna Cole." Grace's jaw dropped. "The mistress?" Adrienne nodded. "Apparently, he's been using her as a prop. Promised her marriage once the crazy wife situation was over. She's not in love. She's scared. Lucas made her sign things. She's covering herself." Grace sat back, stunned. "So she gave you that?" "Her lawyer sent it anonymously. She doesn't want her name in court, but this—" Adrienne tapped the flash drive. "This is enough to destroy him." Grace's heart pounded. "Then why still go to dinner?" "Because we need a witness," Adrienne said. "The Reeds worship appearances. If his own family sees him unravel, they'll confirm everything." Grace swallowed hard. "You think Patricia will protect me?" Adrienne gave a cold smile. "Patricia will protect Patricia. When her son's lies threaten her reputation at church, she'll flip faster than champagne bubbles." Grace couldn't help a small laugh. "You make revenge sound elegant." Adrienne's voice softened. "It's not revenge, Grace. It's self-defense with better lighting." They spent the rest of the afternoon rehearsing. Adrienne drilled her like a lawyer preps a witness: how to sit, how to breathe, what to say if Lucas tried to provoke her. "No tears," Adrienne repeated. "Tears are ammo. Stay calm. If he yells, look at the floor. Let silence expose him." Grace practiced her lines, her hands trembling. "And if he lies?" Adrienne's eyes gleamed. "He will. That's when I step in." Later that night, back in the apartment, Grace stood before the mirror. She wore a black maternity dress Adrienne had picked, a quiet kind of strength. She touched the small mic hidden beneath her neckline. Her reflection looked like a woman preparing for battle, not a dinner. The baby kicked once, strong and sure. Grace smiled faintly. "We're almost there, little one." Outside, the city pulsed with life, taxis rushing, lights flickering, snow melting into rain. She knew somewhere across town, Lucas was probably rehearsing too, crafting his performance, believing he still held the script. But this time, Grace wasn't the trembling wife in his story. She was the ending he never saw coming. And when the clock struck 6 on Sunday, the show would begin, and Lucas Reed would learn that every lie he ever told had an audience. Sunday evening arrived, dressed in false warmth, soft golden lights, the smell of roasted ham, and the illusion of family peace. Patricia Reed's house in New Jersey looked like a page from a lifestyle magazine. Polished oak floors, floral china, and a centerpiece of autumn leaves that screamed togetherness. But under the glow of that chandelier, tension hummed like an exposed wire. Grace stood at the doorway, the cold air still clinging to her coat. Adrienne walked beside her, composed and unreadable in a gray tailored suit. Lucas was already inside, greeting guests with his trademark charm, pretending nothing had happened. He turned when he saw them, his smile so bright it almost hurt to look at. "Grace," he said smoothly, "you came." Grace forced a polite nod. "You invited me." Patricia swooped in, arms open, pearls glinting. "Sweetheart, look at you," she said, kissing Grace's cheek. "You must be exhausted. Come in, come in. Let's put this silliness behind us." Adrienne's lips curved slightly. "I'm here as family support," she said, slipping off her coat but not her professional composure. Patricia's expression flickered. Of course, dear. Always nice to have lawyers at dinner. The dining table gleamed with silver and glass. Lucas pulled out a chair for Grace, his hand grazing her arm. "Let's not make tonight awkward," he whispered. "Smile for my mother." Grace sat, heart pounding. The mic hidden under her dress hummed faintly against her skin. Adrian gave her a small, steady nod from across the table. Dinner began. Patricia led polite conversation. Church renovations, real estate gossip, the weather. Lucas played the doting husband, cutting Grace's turkey, refilling her glass of sparkling water. To anyone else, they looked perfect. Until Lucas said, "I'm just happy Grace is finally feeling stable again. The pregnancy's been emotional, you know?" The room fell silent. Grace froze. Patricia glanced at her son, uncertain. Adrian's voice cut in smoothly. "Emotional or mistreated?" Lucas's fork clattered. "Excuse me?" Adrian smiled politely. "Well, your financial transfers suggest stress levels might come from something other than hormones." Patricia frowned. "Financial transfers?" Adrian slid a folder from her bag, placing it beside the mashed potatoes. "Hotel charges, luxury gifts, dinners at the River Cafe, paid from the joint account, $100,000 to be exact." Patricia's face drained of color. "Lucas, what is this?" Lucas's voice cracked. "Business expenses. You don't understand." "Do investors usually wear red dresses and drink white wine?" Adrian asked lightly. Grace said nothing. She didn't need to. Every eye in the room was now on Lucas. He stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. "This is an ambush." Patricia's voice trembled. "Did you take marital funds for that woman?" Lucas turned on Grace. "You set me up, you and your lawyer cousin." Adrian didn't flinch. "Correction. You set yourself up. You invited her here. You wanted a scene. Congratulations, you got one." Grace stayed calm, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted dinner." Lucas's face twisted with fury. "You'll regret this." Adrian stood. "That's a threat, Mr. Reed. It's being recorded. I'd choose your next words carefully." He froze, realizing too late what she meant. The color drained from his face as he looked around. You recorded me?" Adrian met his eyes. "No, you recorded her. We just borrowed your trick." Patricia backed away from the table, her expression turning from confusion to disgust. "Lucas," she whispered, "you left a pregnant woman alone on Thanksgiving. You embarrassed this family. And now this." He tried to speak, but words failed him. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Grace rose slowly, steadying herself. "Dinner was lovely," she said quietly, "but I think we're done pretending." She turned toward the door, Adrian at her side, while behind them, Lucas Reed's perfect world cracked in front of his mother's eyes, and the fall had only just begun. For a long moment, no one at the table spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of Patricia's chandelier swaying above the chaos. Lucas Reed, once the golden boy of the family, stood trembling beside the overturned chair, his face red with rage and humiliation. Patricia's voice was the first to break the silence. "Lucas," she said slowly, "tell me this isn't true." He turned toward her, desperate. "Mom, please, she's exaggerating. Adrian's manipulating her. You know how emotional Grace gets." Patricia's eyes were cold now. "Don't you dare blame that woman. She's carrying your child." Lucas blinked. "You think she's innocent? She's trying to destroy me." Adrian stepped forward, calm as ever. "No, Mr. Reed, you did that yourself." She placed a small USB drive on the table, its metal glinting in the light. "This contains an audio file from your business dinner. Or should I say, Mistress dinner." Patricia stiffened. "Audio file?" Lucas's voice cracked. "You have no right." Adrian interrupted smoothly. "You were recorded saying, and I quote, 'Once I get custody, she can have her breakdown somewhere else.'" The words hung in the air like poison. Patricia's hand flew to her mouth. Grace's breath caught, her heart pounding in her chest. Lucas tried to recover. "That was taken out of context." Adrian tilted her head. "Of course. You were just joking about taking a baby away from its mother?" Patricia's expression hardened. "Is that what you told me at church last week? That Grace left you for no reason? That you were the victim?" Lucas's charm cracked. "Mom, please, I just wanted to fix things." "Fix?" Patricia's voice rose for the first time in years. "You humiliated your pregnant wife in front of the entire city. You used her money, her dignity, and now you expect me to clean up your mess?" Grace sat frozen, tears threatening but never falling. Adrian rested a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Stay calm." Lucas ran a hand through his hair, the panic rising. You don't understand. Everything I did was for us, for the family's image. Patricia shook her head. No, Lucas, everything you did was for you. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Patricia turned toward Grace. Her voice softened. You need to leave, dear. You shouldn't have to witness this. Grace hesitated, but Adrian gently guided her up. Come on, she whispered. Lucas's voice cracked behind them. You think you can walk out? You think this is over? Adrian turned back, eyes sharp as steel. Actually, yes, it's over. She handed Patricia a single envelope. Inside are copies of the transactions, the recordings, and the custody petition. I thought you deserved to know what your son's been doing in your family's name. Patricia took the envelope with trembling hands. Thank you, she whispered. Grace and Adrian walked toward the front door. The sound of their heels on marble echoed like finality. Behind them, Lucas collapsed into a chair, head in his hands. I can fix this, he muttered to no one. I can fix everything. Patricia's voice came, soft but sharp. No, Lucas, some things you don't fix, you pay for. Grace turned briefly at the doorway. She looked at Patricia, whose eyes glistened with tears of both shame and awakening. Grace gave a small, polite nod, as if to say thank you, for finally seeing. Outside, the air was cold and clean. Adrian helped Grace into the car, shutting the door gently. Grace leaned back, exhaling for the first time in hours. It's really happening, she said softly. Adrian started the engine. Yes, she replied. And he has no idea how much worse it's about to get. Inside the house, Patricia Reed stood alone at the table, the USB still glowing in her hand, listening as her son's voice played, sealing his own downfall. The drive back to Manhattan was silent, except for the rain tapping against the car windows. Grace sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the blur of city lights reflected on the wet pavement. Her hands were clasped around her belly, trembling. Not from fear anymore, but from exhaustion. Adrian kept her eyes on the road, her jaw tight. The glow from the dashboard lit her face in cold blue. You did perfectly, she said finally. Grace shook her head. I didn't even say anything. Exactly, Adrian replied. Silence ruins narcissists. They expect chaos, not composure. Grace gave a tired smile. You make destruction sound like poetry. Adrian smirked faintly. In court it is. They crossed the bridge into the city, the skyline gleaming ahead. Grace's chest tightened at the sight. The last time she'd looked at those lights, she'd been setting a Thanksgiving table and waiting for a man who would never come home. Now she was heading back without him. And for the first time, it didn't feel like loss. It felt like freedom. When they reached the apartment, Adrian helped her out of the car. Grace's legs felt heavy, her back throbbed. Inside, the faint scent of lemon cleaner greeted them. Fresh, safe, nothing like the cold marble of Lucas's penthouse. Adrian guided her to the couch. Drink some water, you need to rest. Grace obeyed, sipping slowly. What happens now? Adrian took off her coat and sat across from her. Patricia won't protect him anymore. That was his last shield. By tomorrow morning, the video, the finances, the recording, everything will be in motion. We'll file first thing Monday. Grace frowned. Won't that destroy him publicly? Adrian's eyes didn't soften. That's the point. Grace stared at her. You really hate him. Adrian's voice dropped. I don't hate him, Grace. I hate what he represents. The kind of man who builds his empire on women's silence. Grace exhaled. And you're not afraid of what he'll do? Adrian smiled thinly. Fear is for people who don't have evidence. For a long moment they sat in the quiet hum of the heater. Grace looked down at her belly. The baby kicked, light but steady. She smiled softly. He's strong tonight. Adrian leaned back. He knows his mother just won a battle. Grace laughed quietly. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels heavy. That's because justice always does, Adrian said. But heavy is better than helpless. Grace nodded. She thought about Patricia's face at the dinner table, shock turning to shame, shame turning to anger. For years, Grace had wanted her approval, had tried to fit into the Reed family mold. But in one night, she realized she didn't need any of them to see her worth. Adrian's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her expression sharpening. He's trying to contact you again. Voicemail this time. Grace's throat tightened. Can I hear it? Adrian handed her the phone. The message began with silence, then Lucas's voice, hoarse, angry, desperate. Grace, you think you've won? You've humiliated me. But you don't know what you've started. You need me. You and that baby need me. Grace listened quietly. Then she handed the phone back. Save it. Adrian raised a brow. You're not going to answer? No, Grace said softly. That's what he wants. He wants noise. He doesn't get it anymore. Adrian smiled slowly, proud. You're learning fast. Grace leaned her head back, closing her eyes. I'm done reacting. Let him talk. I'll live. The storm outside grew louder, wind howling through the cracks of the old windows. But inside, Grace felt a calm that hadn't touched her in years. And as Lucas's voicemail ended in a growl of frustration, Grace finally drifted into sleep, dreaming not of him, but of peace she no longer had to beg for. Monday morning dawned sharp and merciless. Manhattan was already alive, the city of ambition, gossip, and judgment, and Lucas Reed was at the center of it. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Emails from investors, messages from clients, missed calls from journalists. His name had hit the morning headlines. Manhattan broker seen dining with mystery woman on Thanksgiving. Wife files legal motion for custody. The story spread like wildfire. Every real estate blog, every LinkedIn whisper, every private WhatsApp group among brokers had his name on it. His empire, built on image, money, and charm, was crumbling, brick by digital brick. Lucas stood at his office window, staring out over the gray skyline. He looked the part of a powerful man. Custom suit, Rolex, fresh haircut. But his eyes were bloodshot, his hands trembling slightly as he poured coffee that he wouldn't drink. His assistant, nervous and pale, entered quietly. Sir, 2 clients pulled out this morning. They said, well, the optics. Lucas cut her off. Tell them I'm handling it. Family misunderstanding. My wife's unwell. She hesitated. Sir, your wife's lawyer released financial statements, proof of personal funds spent from joint accounts. Lucas spun around. She what? Miss Carter held a press briefing outside family court this morning, the assistant whispered. It's trending. Lucas's pulse hammered. He opened his laptop, pulling up the video. Adrian stood on the courthouse steps in her gray coat, her voice calm and deliberate. Cameras flashed. My client, Grace Mitchell, was abandoned during a high-risk pregnancy, Adrian said. While her husband used marital funds to finance an extramarital relationship, we are seeking full custody, medical protection, and financial restitution. The reporters shouted questions, flashes exploding around her, but Adrian only smiled politely. Grace doesn't want revenge, she said. She wants safety for herself and her unborn child. Lucas slammed the laptop shut so hard the sound echoed through his office. She's playing the victim, he shouted. His assistant flinched. Sir, it's not just her. Even your mother, he turned sharply. What about my mother? She spoke to the press outside her church this morning, the assistant said softly. She said she's deeply disappointed in her son's actions. Lucas froze. The air left his lungs. She what? She confirmed the financial misuse. She said you failed to uphold the family's integrity. The words hit him harder than the headlines. His own mother turning on him publicly. Patricia Reed, queen of the church ladies, the woman whose approval he'd chased his whole life, had chosen Grace. His phone buzzed again. It was Sienna. He hesitated, then answered. Her voice was low, nervous. Lucas, it's over. They came to me. Adrian's people, they know everything. I had to tell them. His jaw clenched. You betrayed me? I protected myself, Sienna whispered. You said this wouldn't go public. You lied. She hung up before he could respond. The silence that followed felt final. He turned toward the window again. The city stretched beneath him. His city. The same skyline that once made him feel invincible now looked like a courtroom full of witnesses. At that same moment, across town, Grace sat on the edge of a hospital bed, waiting for her blood pressure results. Adrian sat beside her, flipping through legal files. Grace's face was calm, almost peaceful. I saw the news, she murmured. He must be furious. Adrian smiled faintly. Furious men make mistakes. Mistakes win cases. Grace exhaled. I don't want to see him destroyed. I just want to be done. Adrian nodded. Then let him destroy himself. Grace looked out the hospital window at the same skyline Lucas was staring at. He already is. Because for the first time in his life, Lucas Reed's charm, power, and lies couldn't save him, and the city he ruled was now watching him fall. Snow was falling outside the hospital windows, soft and steady, like the universe trying to quiet the noise that had taken over Grace's life. She sat in the examination room, wearing the loose blue gown, her fingers fidgeting with the hospital bracelet. The hum of fluorescent lights above her sounded louder than it should. Dr. Lewis, a kind middle-aged woman with silver glasses, flipped through Grace's medical chart. "Your blood pressure's still elevated," she said gently. "Are you under any unusual stress?" Grace laughed, a brittle sound. "Define unusual." The doctor gave her a sympathetic smile. "How far along are you now?" 31 weeks. 32 on Thursday. Dr. Lewis nodded, jotting down notes. "Any fainting, headaches, blurred vision?" Grace hesitated. "Some dizziness, trouble sleeping, and anxiety." The doctor's pen paused. "That's understandable, but you need to be careful. Stress at this stage can trigger preeclampsia. We don't want that." Grace swallowed hard. "I'm trying." Dr. Lewis studied her a moment longer. "Is your husband supportive?" Grace's heart clenched. "He's not in the picture." The doctor's voice softened. "I see. Well, your support system matters. Do you have someone helping you?" "Adrienne," Grace said. "My cousin. She's my lawyer and my anchor." Dr. Lewis smiled. "Good. You'll need her." When the appointment ended, Grace gathered her things. But before she could leave, the doctor handed her an official form. "This is a stress-related medical note," Dr. Lewis said. "It documents your emotional and physical condition. It could help your attorney if custody becomes contested." Grace blinked. "You'd do that?" The doctor's smile didn't waver. "Pregnancy isn't just physical, Grace. The law should know what he put you through." Grace felt her throat tighten. "Thank you." Later, in the hallway, Adrienne waited, phone pressed to her ear, giving instructions to someone on her team. When she saw the paper in Grace's hand, she ended the call immediately. "What's that?" "Medical documentation," Grace said softly. "The doctor says it proves the stress affected my health." Adrienne's eyes lit up. "That's our bulletproof vest. With this, no judge will give him custody, not even partial without supervision." Grace smiled weakly. "It feels strange, turning pain into paperwork." Adrienne looked at her cousin, her expression tender for once. "That's what women like us have always done, turn pain into protection." They walked down the hospital corridor together, the sterile lights reflecting off the white floor. Grace felt lighter, though she still carried a deep ache in her chest. As they stepped outside, snowflakes landed in Grace's hair, melting instantly against her skin. For the first time in weeks, she felt the cold as something real, grounding, cleansing. "Let's get you home," Adrienne said, opening the car door. "You've done enough for today." Grace hesitated before getting in. "Do you think he's still fighting?" Adrienne smirked. "He's spinning. His team's trying to file a counterclaim. They're arguing you're mentally unfit. But the thing is, his lawyer doesn't know about this yet." She tapped the medical note. "Tomorrow, that all changes." Grace's voice was quiet but firm. "Good. Let the truth speak louder than him." That night, back in the apartment, Grace pinned the doctor's note to her refrigerator with a magnet. For most people, it would look like just another medical document. But to her, it was armor, proof that her suffering had a name and that someone, somewhere, believed her. She touched her stomach. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. The baby moved, gentle and strong. And miles away, in his darkened apartment, Lucas stared at a cease and desist letter from Adrienne's firm, realizing for the first time that the walls around him weren't just closing in, they were signed, sealed, and notarized. By Thursday morning, the first official document arrived. A white envelope with the state seal, crisp and cold as judgment. Grace stood at the apartment door, holding it in trembling hands. Adrienne had warned her this moment would come, the custody hearing notice. She placed it on the table and stared at it for a long time, as if opening it would make everything real. The city outside buzzed with the rhythm of normal life, coffee carts, horns, laughter, but for Grace, time stood still. When Adrienne arrived minutes later, she didn't even need to ask. She saw the envelope and nodded. "That's the start of his end." Grace whispered, "It feels like the start of a war." Adrienne smiled faintly. "Same thing, just with better stationery." Grace managed a laugh, though her stomach churned. "He really filed for custody?" Adrienne took the papers, scanning them quickly. "Yes. Emergency petition for full custody on the basis of maternal instability due to emotional stress." Grace's heart dropped. "He's using my own medical condition against me." Adrienne looked up, her eyes cold with determination. "Not for long." She pulled out her tablet and tapped the screen. "We'll file a counter motion immediately." with the medical note from Dr. Lewis, your documented texts, and financial records. It won't just defend you, Grace. It'll expose him. Grace sank into a chair. How can he still fight after everything? After his mother, the press, everything. Adrienne leaned forward, her tone softer. Because men like Lucas don't stop when they lose love. They stop when they lose power. And power is the only language he speaks. Grace swallowed. Then we'll speak it back. Adrienne smiled. That's my girl. They spent the next several hours preparing the response. Adrienne dictated while Grace typed. Every sentence, every legal term felt like a weapon being forged. Custodial endangerment, financial misconduct, psychological manipulation. When they finished, Adrienne slid the papers into a new envelope and sealed it with her firm's insignia. She looked at Grace. You ready? Grace exhaled, as I'll ever be. Adrienne nodded. Good, because the first hearing's set for Monday. Grace froze. That soon? Yes, Adrienne said. But that's good. He'll be scrambling. His side will come in unprepared. We'll come in with proof, composure, and truth. That's how you win. Grace stared at the snow falling outside the window, flakes glowing under streetlights. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like surviving. Adrienne smiled softly. Survival is winning. Later that evening, Grace sat alone at the dining table. The city hummed around her, muffled by the glass. She thought of Lucas, probably pacing his apartment, barking at his lawyer, pretending to be in control. He never handled exposure well. His pride was ilt. Her phone buzzed. A message from Patricia. I'm sorry for everything. I was blind. Whatever you need for court, I'll testify. He needs to face what he's done. Grace stared at the screen, her throat tight. She typed back slowly. Thank you, Patricia. That means more than you know. When she set the phone down, she felt something new. Closure. Not the loud, cinematic kind. The quiet kind that creeps in when you realize you've already survived the worst. Adrienne returned later that night, dropping a folder on the table. His lawyer's playing dirty, she said. They're pushing the narrative that you're emotionally unfit. Grace didn't flinch. Then I'll show them what unbroken looks like. Adrienne smiled proudly. That's the energy we need in court. Grace looked down at her belly, feeling a firm kick. For him, she said. Every word, every fight, every breath, it's all for him. And somewhere across the city, as Lucas rehearsed his lies in front of a mirror, he didn't realize that Monday's hearing would become the day the world stopped believing him forever. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, the kind of day when breath turned to fog and nerves turned to steel. Grace stood outside the family court building, her gloved hands gripping the strap of her purse. Her heart thudded so hard she could hear it. She was 7 months pregnant now, her coat barely buttoned over her belly, her face pale but calm. Adrienne stood beside her, flawless in a charcoal suit, hair pinned neatly, holding a black leather folder. You ready? She asked. Grace nodded slowly. I think so. Adrienne gave her a reassuring look. Remember, he'll perform. He always performs. Don't give him an audience. Judges respect composure more than tears. Grace exhaled. I can do composure. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than she expected. Sterile, cold, almost impersonal. Pale wood walls, a judge's bench, 2 tables facing each other. Lucas was already there, dressed in an expensive navy suit, his wedding ring notably gone. His lawyer, Mark Davenport, whispered something in his ear. Lucas didn't look at Grace right away, but when he finally did, his smirk was faint and cruel. He still thinks he's in control, Grace thought. The bailiff called the session to order. Case 48 at B. Reed versus Reed. Judge Morrison, a stern woman with gray hair pulled back into a bun, glanced down at the paperwork. We're here to discuss preliminary custody proceedings regarding the unborn child of Grace Mitchell Reed and Lucas Reed. Lucas's lawyer rose first, by voice smooth and confident. Your Honor, my client wishes to establish that Mrs. Reed has demonstrated emotional instability during her pregnancy. Episodes of paranoia, erratic behavior, and an unwillingness to communicate. He seeks temporary custody upon the child's birth for the safety and well-being of the baby. Grace's stomach nodded. Adrienne didn't move. When the judge nodded to her, she stood gracefully. Your Honor, Adrienne began, this petition is built on projection, not evidence. We have documentation, medical, financial, and psychological, that directly contradicts every claim made here. She handed over a neatly bound folder. Inside were copies of bank statements, text messages, and the doctor's note. Judge Morrison flipped through them, eyes narrowing. Mr. Reed, are you aware your personal expenditures exceeded $100,000 in the past 6 months, all from joint marital funds? Lucas's jaw tightened. Those were business expenses. Adrian smiled thinly. At the River Cafe and the Ritz-Carlton? The courtroom went silent. The judge looked unimpressed. You expect this court to believe hotel bills and jewelry receipts are business expenses? Lucas's lawyer interjected. Your Honor, these details are irrelevant to custody. On the contrary, Adrian cut in smoothly, they're evidence of character, financial recklessness, and emotional manipulation. My client, a pregnant woman suffering from stress-induced hypertension, was left alone on Thanksgiving while her husband entertained another woman. That same evening, he texted her calling her unstable for asking where he was. Grace looked down, eyes glistening, but she didn't cry. She didn't need to. The silence said enough. Judge Morrison leaned back in her chair. I'll review the submitted materials. Until further notice, Mrs. Reed retains full custodial rights. Mr. Reed is restricted from direct contact pending mediation. Lucas's face drained of color. What? The judge banged her gavel lightly. Mr. Reed, any attempt to harass or manipulate your wife during this pregnancy will result in immediate legal action. Do I make myself clear? He swallowed hard. Yes, Your Honor. The session adjourned. Grace sat frozen, tears finally slipping free, not from fear, but from relief. Adrian touched her shoulder. You just won the first round. Grace looked up, whispering, Then let's finish it. Behind them, Lucas stood motionless as reporters snapped photos, his perfect image cracking under the fluorescent courtroom light. The courtroom doors closed behind them with a heavy thud that sounded almost ceremonial. Grace exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. The cold air of the hallway hit her face, sharp and clean, like a baptism. Adrian walked beside her, heels clicking in even, confident rhythm. You did perfectly, Adrian said softly, adjusting the strap of her leather folder. Grace shook her head. I didn't do anything. Adrian smiled faintly. Exactly. You stayed calm, you let him unravel. Grace looked back through the glass wall, where Lucas still stood inside the courtroom speaking angrily to his lawyer. His face was pale, jaw tight, shoulders stiff. The man who once walked through boardrooms like he owned the city now looked like a shadow trying to hold itself together. Adrian turned to her. We're not done. This was just the opening act. He'll come back swinging. Grace nodded. I know, but now I'm not afraid of him. Outside, a crowd of reporters waited at the courthouse steps. Cameras flashed, voices called her name. Adrian took Grace's arm, shielding her as they moved toward the car. No statements, Adrian whispered. Let them speculate. Silence drives them insane. Grace obeyed, her gaze focused straight ahead. Somewhere behind the chaos, she saw Patricia standing alone by the fence, wrapped in a beige coat, her pearl earrings catching the gray light. Their eyes met briefly. Patricia gave a small nod, part apology, part blessing. Grace smiled faintly, then stepped into the car. As they drove off, Adrian's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and groaned. Of course! What is it? Grace asked. Lucas went live. Grace blinked. What? Adrian turned the screen so she could see. Lucas's face filled the video feed, eyes red, voice strained but rehearsed. I just want to say, he began, that I still love my wife. This situation has been twisted. I've made mistakes, but I'm only trying to protect my child. Grace's stomach turned. He's weaponizing sympathy, Adrian smirked, and handing us more evidence of manipulation. Keep recording. Lucas continued. Grace is sick. She needs help. I'm not angry. I'm heartbroken. His tone cracked on cue. The comments flooded in. Stay strong, Lucas. Praying for your family. Women can be cruel when hormonal. Grace's hands clenched into fists. He's so good at lying, Adrian nodded, which is why we'll let him talk himself into a corner. 2 hours later, the live video had been viewed 500,000 times and debunked just as quickly. Screenshots of financial documents, dinner photos, and hotel receipts filled social media, posted by anonymous accounts. Within minutes, the sympathy flipped to outrage. So this is the man claiming to be heartbroken? Pregnant wife at home, mistress at the Ritz? Canceled as fraud. Adrian's phone buzzed again, Patricia this time. I just made a statement to the church board. He's suspended from the men's charity committee. I'm done protecting him. Grace read the message, tears welling. She actually did it. Adrian smiled softly. Every empire falls from the inside, Grace. His is collapsing beautifully. That night, back at the apartment, Grace sat on the couch with her laptop open. The internet was ablaze with discussions about the Thanksgiving betrayal. Strangers sent her messages, women sharing stories of being gaslighted, abandoned, silenced. One message caught her eye. "Your strength gave me courage to leave my own Lucas." Grace's chest tightened. For the first time, she realized her pain wasn't isolated. It was a mirror for others. Adrian entered with tea, setting it beside her. "You okay?" Grace nodded slowly. "Better than okay. For the first time, I feel." Adrian smiled. "Good, because tomorrow we make sure he's heard, legally, financially, permanently." Grace touched her belly, whispering, "Almost there, baby. Almost free." And as Lucas scrolled through the comments calling him a fraud, his reflection in the phone screen looked like the man he truly was. Exposed, powerless, and finally out of script. The next morning, Grace woke up to a quiet apartment and sunlight creeping through the blinds. For once, it wasn't the light that woke her. It was her phone buzzing non-stop on the nightstand. Dozens of notifications lit up the screen. Adrian had texted one word: delivered. Grace blinked, sitting up slowly. "Delivered?" she murmured. Seconds later, the news alert appeared on her lock screen. "Reed Realty under investigation for financial misconduct." She froze, reading the headline twice. The article beneath it was merciless. Sources close to the investigation allege that Lucas Reed, owner of Reed Realty Group, is being audited for misuse of client funds and falsified expense reports, many tied to personal accounts and luxury charges at high-end establishments. Grace's heart raced. "Oh my God." Adrian called at that moment. "You saw it?" "Yes," Grace whispered. "What did you do?" Adrian's tone was matter-of-fact. "I didn't do anything illegal. I simply sent a few documents to the right agency. Public records, really. The rest handled itself." Grace covered her mouth. "He's finished." "Not yet," Adrian said, "but by the time the auditors are done, he will be." Meanwhile, across town, Lucas sat in his office surrounded by chaos. His assistant was crying in the hallway, the phone wouldn't stop ringing, and 3 clients had just pulled their listings. He slammed his laptop shut, veins visible in his neck. "Find out who leaked it," he barked. His lawyer, Mark, sighed. "You can't stop a federal audit, Lucas, especially when it's based on financial evidence. You spent client deposits on hotels. That's not defensible." Lucas glared at him. "You're fired." Mark didn't even argue, he just stood gathering his files. "You don't need a lawyer, Lucas. You need a miracle." When the door slammed behind him, Lucas sank into his chair. His empire, built on appearances and arrogance, was collapsing faster than he could rebuild. He reached for his phone, scrolling to Grace's number. It was still blocked. He typed a text anyway, fingers trembling. "You're destroying everything. Are you happy now?" No reply. Grace, meanwhile, sat with Adrian in her Park Avenue office, sipping peppermint tea as the winter sun streamed through the glass. Her belly had grown round and full. She was tired, but her eyes gleamed with calm purpose. "He texted again," Grace said quietly. Adrian nodded. "Let him. Every word is another nail in his coffin." Grace hesitated. "Does it ever stop feeling like a war?" Adrian's voice softened. "It stops when you stop caring who wins." Grace looked out at the skyline. "I used to love this city because it reminded me of him. Now I love it because I survived him." Adrian smiled. "That's the most powerful revenge there is." Later that afternoon, the world learned that Reed Realty had officially suspended operations pending internal review. Lucas's investors issued statements distancing themselves. His phone calls went unanswered. By evening, his Mercedes was repossessed from the company lot. Grace read the updates quietly while folding baby clothes in her apartment. The onesies were tiny, soft, smelling faintly of lavender detergent. She smiled through tears. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. "He can't hurt us anymore." Adrian knocked and stepped in. "I just got word. The court advanced the final custody hearing. 2 weeks from today." Grace nodded slowly. 2 weeks to finish this. Adrian placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. 2 weeks to close the chapter. Grace looked out the window, snowflakes falling over the city she once feared to face alone. And across town, Lucas sat in darkness, surrounded by unopened bills and empty whiskey glasses. His phone lighting up with a new message from his accountant. "Federal agents have questions. Call me immediately." 2 weeks later, The sky over Manhattan was pale and heavy, the kind of morning that felt suspended between endings and beginnings. Grace stood outside the courthouse again, bundled in a long camel coat, her belly now visibly round beneath the fabric. The world had changed since she'd last been here. News outlets had already declared Lucas Reed's career beyond repair, and his once flashy company sign on Fifth Avenue had been quietly removed overnight. Adrian arrived a few minutes later, her usual calm radiating through the chaos of reporters. She adjusted her sunglasses and handed Grace a thermos of warm tea. "Drink," she said. "No fainting today. This is the last time you'll ever have to see him." Grace nodded, her breath fogging the cold air. "I've rehearsed this in my head 100 times, she said softly. "But now that it's real, I just want it over." Adrian smiled. "It will be. You've already won. You just need the paperwork to prove it." Inside the courtroom, Lucas looked like a ghost of himself. His tailored suit hung looser now, his tie crooked, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. The arrogance that once filled every gesture had drained out of him, replaced with something hollow. Fear. The judge entered, calling the room to order. "This court is now reconvened for final custody determination in the matter of Reed versus Reed." Lucas's lawyer spoke first, voice strained but polite. "Your Honor, my client wishes to express regret for any past misunderstandings. He acknowledges poor judgment but insists he is capable of responsible fatherhood." Adrian rose smoothly, her voice calm and razor-sharp. "Your Honor, we have no objection to responsible fatherhood, if such a thing existed here. However, the evidence shows a clear pattern of emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and reckless behavior during a high-risk pregnancy." She approached the bench, handing the judge a folder. Exhibit F. Dr. Lewis's report confirming stress-related hypertension caused by Mr. Reed's conduct. Exhibit G. Federal inquiry notice confirming ongoing financial investigation into Reed Realty. The judge flipped through the documents, frowning. "Mr. Reed, are you aware of this investigation?" Lucas's voice cracked. Yes, but it has nothing to do with my family." Adrian didn't miss a beat. "On the contrary, Your Honor, the misuse of marital funds is directly tied to his misconduct as a husband. He built an empire on deception, and when the mask fell, he weaponized his wife's pregnancy to preserve control." Grace watched silently, heart pounding. Adrian didn't need theatrics. Her calm precision was enough to make the room still. When the judge turned to her, Grace stood slowly. "Your Honor," she said quietly, "I don't want revenge. I just want peace, for me and for my child. I've lived in fear for too long. I don't want my baby growing up thinking love is something that hurts." The judge studied her for a long moment. Then she spoke, voice firm but kind. "Mrs. Reed, your composure today speaks louder than any argument. The court grants you full physical and legal custody. Mr. Reed is restricted to supervised visitation pending further review." Lucas's mouth fell open. "That's insane. I'm his father." The judge's gavel came down hard. "You were given chances, Mr. Reed. You squandered them." Court adjourned. The sound echoed through the room like finality. Grace didn't move for several seconds. She just breathed, slow, deep, steady. When she finally turned toward Lucas, he looked at her with something close to realization. For once, he had no words, no power, no control. Adrian touched Grace's shoulder. "It's over." Grace nodded, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "No," she whispered. "It's just beginning." And as they walked out into the winter sunlight, Lucas Reed remained seated in silence, watching the woman he once tried to break walk away stronger than he could ever be. The snow had melted by the time spring arrived, washing the city clean of its winter bruises. Grace Mitchell, no longer Grace Reed, stood at the window of her new apartment overlooking Central Park, sunlight spilling across her hardwood floors. The air smelled faintly of coffee and baby lotion. A tiny bassinet sat by the couch, rocking gently as her newborn son slept, his small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Grace sipped from a mug that said, "Strong women raise stronger ones." Adrian had given it to her at the hospital, along with a tired smile and a whispered, "You did it." Now, weeks later, the world outside had moved on from the Thanksgiving scandal. Reed Realty was gone. Lucas had quietly pled to financial charges to avoid a public trial, his license suspended. The city that once praised him now forgot him, as cities always do. Grace's phone buzzed with a new email notification, an update from her lawyer's office. She opened it slowly, heart steady. Final divorce decree granted. Case closed. She exhaled. No tears this time, just peace. Adrienne arrived a few minutes later, carrying grocery bags and her usual energy. "You look awake," she teased. "That's rare for a new mom." Grace smiled faintly. He slept 4 hours straight, and for Stret it felt like a miracle. Adrienne glanced toward the baby. "He looks like you. Thank God." Grace laughed softly. "He deserves a clean name, a clean start." They sat together at the small kitchen table. Sunlight caught Adrienne's hair, turning it gold at the edges. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Knowing it's finally over?" Grace looked out the window, the park alive with joggers, kites, and families. "It doesn't feel like the end," she said quietly. "It feels like breathing after being underwater too long." Adrienne nodded, pulling out a wrapped box from her bag. "Then it's time for your next chapter." Grace unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a sleek silver pen engraved G. Mitchell. Grace smiled. "Mont Blanc?" Adrienne shrugged. "A lawyer's weakness. You should have one too, for signing better things." Grace held the pen, her fingers tracing the engraving. "What better things?" Adrienne smirked. "Your future. I read your email draft. That teaching fellowship at Columbia. It's perfect. You belong in a classroom again." Grace hesitated. "Do you really think I can go back to that life?" "I think you can build a better one," Adrienne said firmly. "You didn't survive all this to hide. You survived to teach women how not to." Grace blinked back tears. "You always sound like you're writing a movie script." Adrienne grinned. "Maybe I am. You're just my favorite character." The baby stirred, making a soft cooing noise. Grace lifted him gently, pressing her cheek against his tiny head. "You know," she whispered, "this Thanksgiving we'll make our own dinner. Just the two of us." Adrienne smiled. "And maybe me. I'll bring pie." Grace laughed quietly. "Deal." She stood by the window, cradling her son, watching sunlight scatter across the park's green expanse. Somewhere below, children laughed, dogs barked, the city pulsed with life. It felt new again, like a story restarting. Her phone buzzed once more, a message from an unknown number. Just 2 words, "I'm sorry." Grace looked at it for a long moment, then pressed delete. No hesitation, no anger, just peace. Adrienne watched her. "That felt good, didn't it?" Grace nodded. "Better than revenge." Outside, the city kept moving, uncaring and beautiful. Inside, Grace kissed her baby's forehead and whispered, "You'll grow up knowing love doesn't hurt." And as the afternoon sun poured through the windows, Grace Mitchell smiled for the first time in years. Not because she was free from him, but because she had finally found herself. So, that's how our story ends. Grace finally found peace, not because the world suddenly became kind, but because she chose herself when everything else fell apart. You're still here listening until this very moment, aren't you? Then maybe, just maybe, something in her story touched your heart too. Life has a strange way of testing us through pain, but as Marcus Aurelius once wrote, the obstacle is the way. Every betrayal, every heartbreak, every sleepless night, none of it was wasted. It was shaping her strength, and maybe it's shaping yours too. Grace's journey reminds us that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means looking at your scars and saying, "I survived, and I'm still standing." You don't need revenge. You need peace. You don't need to prove your worth. You already have it. So, if her story stirred something in you, hope, courage, or maybe a little reminder of your own strength, then don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with us for more stories that remind you. Pain can break you, but it can also build the most beautiful version of you. Because healing is the quietest kind of victory.